I'm Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm presenting some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular installment is the second of two on William Shakespeare's play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. In the earlier webcast, I described the conventions of the Roman New Comedy, a conventional plot structure, a model that Shakespeare uses in many of his plays, both comedies and sometimes includes elements of even in his tragedies. Briefly, here's the pattern. The play begins with a pair of young lovers who want to get married, but there's an obstacle. Parents object to the marriage. A sympathetic servant or member of the older generation, perhaps an aunt or an uncle, help the young couple to get together. Eventually, after some comic mishaps, the subterfuge is revealed and the parents come to accept the marriage. This is the pattern of a comedy, not just because the plays are funny, which they are, but also because the plays have a happy ending. The young couple who want to get married simply because they love each other represent a symbolic threat to the existing order of Elizabethan society, in which marriages were typically arranged between families, and young women, at least, didn't get married without their parents' consent. At the end of a typical new comedy, the parents have accepted the marriage and everyone is relatively happy. The community is intact and the future is secure for the moment. In Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare takes the basic elements of the new comedy plot structure, he multiplies them, complicates them, fragmenting the structure into multiple plot lines before he ties everything together in a neat package at the end. The play begins with the announcement of a marriage, but it's not the marriage of a young couple. Rather, it's the marriage of Theseus, the Duke of Athens, who has triumphed in a war with the Amazons, the mythic society of warrior women. He has claimed the right to marry Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. This questionable basis on which to begin a marriage sets a general tone that will be carried through the play. The announcement scene is interrupted by the appearance of four new characters. There is Hermia and Lysander, the two young lovers who want to get married, and also Hermia's father, Aegeus, who objects to this marriage. But Aegeus has brought with him Demetrius, another young man who is favored by Aegeus to be Hermia's husband. When Hermia refuses to honor her father's command to marry Demetrius, Theseus tells her that according to the law of Athens, she must either be put to death or agree to enter the convent and never to marry. Faced with this dilemma, Hermia and Lysander bemoan their situation. But Lysander proposes a solution. He has an aunt who lives in a nearby city. If they can elope and go to her house, she will protect them and they can be married. Notice that this aunt, who never appears in person in the play, functions as a sympathetic member of the older generation that audiences will be expecting in the new comedy plot structure. At this point, Helena appears. Helena and Hermia are close friends from childhood, and Helena is on familiar terms with Lysander as well. So Hermia and Lysander reveal their plans for eloping to Helena, and they leave. In a soliloquy, Helena thinks over what to do. In effect, Shakespeare puts her in a situation of being both an obstacle to the marriage between Hermia and Lysander, and, surprisingly, an enabler of Demetrius's desire to marry Hermia. How does this work? Well, she is so enamored of Demetrius, even though he has jilted her, that she determines to tell him of Lysander's and Hermia's plan to flee into the woods en route to the safety of Lysander's aunt. She realizes that this is a conflicted act on her part. By helping Demetrius to block the marriage of Hermia and Lysander, she will be further diminishing her chances to restore her relationship with Demetrius. But she is so infatuated with Demetrius that she will go through with this plan simply because it gives her the opportunity to follow him into the forest, an opportunity to feast her eyes on his sight for a little while. And with that soliloquy, Shakespeare ends Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 2 opens in a different register, among a group of local village craftsmen who have learned about the marriage of Duke Theseus and Queen Hippolyta and are planning to rehearse and perform a play at the marriage celebration, with some hope of receiving reward from the Duke. The play they will perform, the story of Pyramus and Thisbe, is a tragic love story from the Roman poet Ovid, and when they perform Pyramus and Thisbe in Act 5, its effect will be somewhat more comic than tragic, thus contributing to Shakespeare's elaborated critique of romantic love. Act 2 opens with yet another change of setting, another realm of reality, or rather, a realm of fantasy. In the forest, outside of Athens, we meet Oberon and Titania, the king and queen of the fairies. They're having a marital spat. They part without a resolution, and Oberon sends his servant, Puck, to gather some flowers for a potion that will make anyone fall in love with the first creature he or she sees upon waking. He's going to take out his spite on his queen. In the meantime, he happens to see and overhear Helena chasing after Demetrius and complaining about how badly he treats her. Oberon feels sympathy for her. Greek mythology, after all, is full of stories of gods and goddesses favoring particular mortals and sometimes falling in love with them. Oberon instructs Puck to find the disdainful Athenian youth, Demetrius, and to sprinkle the love potion on his eyes so that he will fall in love with Helena when he awakens. Puck, however, gets the wrong youth, and before the situation is corrected, he has sprinkled the love potion on the eyes of both Demetrius and Lysander, and both of them are now in love with Helena. Puck overhears Peter Quince and his amateur band of actors rehearsing in the woods, and just for the fun of it, he transforms Bottom's head into the head of an ass. Oberon sprinkles the love potion over Titania's eyes as she sleeps. She will awaken and see Bottom, the mortal with the ass's head, and Demetrius and Lysander will both end up in love with Helena. Now Hermia is spurned. The upshot of all of these confusions is simply that love is blind. You can't really trust romantic love. Better, it would seem, to let the parents, the older generation, make the arrangements. Eventually, when Oberon sees what has happened, he sends Puck to correct the mistakes. Now, Puck will sprinkle love potion on Lysander's eyes and contrive it so that when he awakens, he will see Hermia and fall in love with her again. Demetrius remains in love with Helena as a result of Puck's earlier mistake with the love potion, and so the two young couples are matched in a way that is satisfactory for each of them. And this is how they are found in Act 4, when Duke Theseus, Queen Hippolyta, and their hunting party discover them in the woods. The will of Aegeus to have his daughter marry Demetrius is now a moot point, since Demetrius doesn't want to marry Hermia anymore. He wants to marry Helena. All the couples are in love with each other, and all the right couples have been matched together. Aegeus has now little choice but to accept the marriage of the original pair of young lovers, his daughter Hermia and Lysander. That's the end of the fourth act, and the fifth act wouldn't actually be necessary in order to fulfill the requirements of the new comedy plot. But there's an Act 5 concerning the entertainments after the marriage celebrations, after the three marriages, Duke Theseus and Queen Hippolyta, Helena and Demetrius, and Lysander and Hermia. In effect, the fifth act is a kind of a coda, a commentary both on the theater and on love. Peter Quince and his company performed the play Pyramus and Thisbe with an inadvertently comic effect. At one point during the play of Pyramus and Thisbe, Queen Hippolyta turns to Duke Theseus and says, "This is the silliest stuff that ever I heard." Theseus's response, excusing the actors, would serve as an excuse for romantic love as well. "The best in this kind," he says, "are but shadows, and the worst are no worse, if imagination amend them. Love is blind, it's unpredictable, and it requires an active imagination on the parts of all parties involved. With that, I'll conclude this webcast. But, as always, if you have questions or comments, send me an email.